Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday night. That has been a beautiful day today. Last time we've been trying to do lectures and concerts, it's either been very cold or very wet. So this is great. My name is Chris. I'm the house manager and programs person here at Beauregard Kai's house. You may have seen, if you've been here before, the house looks a little bit different. We have two different displays up at the moment. One of them you walked past as you came in through the door, and that is our St. Joseph's altar. This week we are celebrating St. Joseph's Day, which happens on Saturday, and here at the house we put up the altar a few days before so that people can experience it. Apart from that, we also have the Black Masking display up in the parlor. We can thank Diane Honore and Angel Cutno for creating these suits and allowing us to put them on display during St. Joseph's as well. There is a very meaningful connection between these two different communities and St. Joseph's Day, which Denise will talk about in just a second. But you may have grabbed a little bag from the altar on your way in. Inside of it, you will most likely find, if they were put together in the right way, you might find a prayer card. You'll find maybe a fava bean, which you're supposed to put in your wallet for good luck. For wealth, I should say. You may find a piece of bread, and if you put that in your freezer or in your fridge, it will stave off hunger or famine. And I'm forgetting one thing. The cookie's just to eat. You're hungry, so eat the cookie. So the St. Joseph's altar is very important to us here at the Beauregard Kai's house, along with the Black Masking tradition. Because these two communities are very much a part of our history. This house was first owned by 3 different families prior to the Civil War, and all of them had enslaved people on this property. Those Afro-Creole people are as much a part of our history as they are. And apart from that, after the Civil War, this house was owned by 2 different Italian-American, Italian immigrant families for about 5 decades or so. And at that point in time, prior to the 20th century, the French Quarter became very much a working class neighborhood. And these two communities, both the Afro-Creole population and the Italian population, lived closely together, both here in the French Quarter and in Tremé. And so that time period is very much a significant part of this house's history. And we are so excited to have Denise here to expand on that history as well. Denise Augustine is a 7th generation Creole griot who is from Tremé and the French Quarter, lived in both places. She is the owner and operator of Our Sacred Stories here, which is a tour company. She also teaches classes on storytelling and in general is one of the best. And without much more, Denise Augustine. Thank you.
I did not ask how I got here until about half an hour ago. I did not want it to affect what I talked about. So I didn't ask how Chris and Annie found me. But I want to thank Chris and Annie, the full-time staff of the Beauregard Kai's house, for the invitation. Yes, I grew up in Tremé, and let's clarify something first. Tremé is often called the first neighborhood set aside for free people of color. Yes, but it has always been integrated. My mother was born in the French Quarter on St. Anne Street, which was also always integrated, the French Quarter, on St. Anne between Dauphine and Bourbon, next to the school, upstairs in the slave quarter, and born by a midwife. So I can honestly say in her life and in mine, and even now in my son's, we have always had some relationships with Sicilians mostly. Now let me tell you, because I am always looking to test my friends, when Chris asked me for a bio, I used the word Italian to see how long it would take before the phone call came. And I can tell you, it was not 5 minutes when I got a phone call, and the first thing my friend, my Sicilian who's in my life at this time, because there's always one, Laura Guccione said, "Sicilian," with that little voice of hers, and I thought, yeah, you're paying attention. You're paying attention. Here's my timekeeper, Laura Guccione, who is researching St. Joseph Day right now, and the research that she has uncovered. I told her, when you reveal this research, we're definitely going to have our tennis shoes on because we're going to have to run out of here with the proof that she's found about the building of St. Joseph Day in this community. So let's get back to my roots, let's say. So my mother born on St. Anne between Dauphine and Bourbon, upstairs in a slave quarter by a midwife. Her mother was a cook for a very wealthy family. And the cook had to also serve the food, make sure everybody had what they wanted. And she did not get home. My grandmother, Amalie, did not get home until 7 o'clock in the evening. Meanwhile, my mother went to St. Louis Cathedral School and got out at normal school time, whether it was 2:30, because sometimes Catholic schools would let children out 2:30, 3 o'clock is now the norm. But there was nobody in the neighborhood, no family in the neighborhood close enough to get her, and my family was also working class. And so who kept her was a Sicilian woman next door who spoke no English. So in turn, my mother was fluent in Italian and learned to cook from this woman, because girls at this time, you started learning to cook at the age of 5, 6. You stood in the kitchen, they showed you how to do things. And when I came along in the early 1950s, the French Quarter, where we lived part of the time, was a neighborhood that smelled of humanity. Not this kind of thing that's going on now where people come home and go inside their house. You knew your neighbors. You could smell their cooking. This was a working class neighborhood of tenement houses and rooms like rooming houses, and in many cases, I remember as a young girl having to go through somebody else's house to get to somebody else's apartment. You literally went up the steps, went through their house, came out on the balcony, and then went into their house. And so we lived closely with our neighbors. I also remember in the 1950s, as being a little girl, that you could walk through the French Quarter and hear different languages. This neighborhood was full of a lot of different kinds of people who interacted with each other, who knew each other, who knew each other's children. And in spite of the working class neighborhood, I felt safer then in the neighborhood of all these different kinds of people than I feel now, because you knew who these people were. And also, it was a neighborhood that was filled with groceries. You were not having to get in a car to go find a grocery. There was groceries on every other corner, both Afro-Creoles and Italians. On the corner of Dauphine and St. Peter, where the Gold Mine Saloon is now, there was a Creole family. Mr. Almond had a grocery store there. And in the next block on Toulouse and Dauphine was an Italian grocery by the Martins. This neighborhood was food heavy because not only did you have these neighborhood grocery stores, but at the time, the French market was actively a place where you got food. Names of people: Chusamano, Dilio, Mancusa. The Rufinos lived right in the middle of the block on St. Peter Street between. So this neighborhood was heavy, not only with Afro-Creoles, working class Afro-Creoles, but working class Sicilians, mostly Sicilians. And if I had $1 for every time I said Italian, and one of them would say, "We're Sicilian, Denise, Sicilian," and I had no idea what it meant, but it meant that they were not Italian. One of the most Creole of grocery stores was Ferrera's Tremé Market on Orleans Avenue. And if you grew up in this neighborhood, you remember that grocery store as one where it was not only a grocery store, but it was a social event, because when you made the big groceries, that's where you made them. I mean, you could go into the corner groceries, and I remember my mother telling me, "Go get me 10 cents of red beans, 15 cents of rice. Tell him, give you a ham bone, get me 3 Dixie and 3 Regals." Nobody cared. I was 7 years old. And nothing was packaged. This was not packaged food. Your grocery, your 15 cents of rice and your 10 cents of red beans was put in a little brown bag. They would scoop it, sometime weigh it, sometime not, roll it up and tape it, fix the rice, tape it, and give you a ham bone. 2 days ago, I was in a grocery store on Veterans, and the ham bone was $6.15, and it wasn't even a big one, okay? And so, food was easy to come by. So, also, in Tremé Market, if you walked in the back, there was live turtles. In cages. And if you knew better from the age of 2 or 3 not to put your finger in there, because when a child walked in the room, that's where the seafood was sold, the shrimp and the fish and live turtles. You knew not to put your finger in there because every one of your neighbors was watching to make sure that you didn't accidentally test those turtles in that pen. Teresa's on Dumaine Street. So, the 1950s and early 1960s, there were still Italians in the neighborhood. Teresa's on Dumaine between Roman and Prayer sold seafood and fresh vegetables, and the Costanzas had the gas station on the corner of Prayer and Dumaine. And most of y'all, many of you will remember gas stations inside of neighborhoods and not on highways and main streets. Your gas station was there, though many of us never had cars. And so you also, being that they are as Catholic as we are, these Sicilians, there were dry goods stores in the neighborhood, one of them on Orleans and Claiborne, where when you made your first Holy Communion, nobody went to Canal Street, you didn't have to. You went in there, you could find ribbon, a christening gown, your first Holy Communion dress, everything that you needed. So between the French Quarter and Tremé, we lived in an insular neighborhood because everything was available to us. And I can honestly say, even as a young adult, there were many, many years where I did not leave the French Quarter unless to go to the airport. There was no reason to leave. My mother I'm easily embarrassed. So for once I'm easily embarrassed. I'm grateful to see friends here. My class, some members of my class, I just got to finish teaching a storytelling class. The members of my class showed up. Former co-workers showed up to give me, because I'm gonna tell you, I had serious anxiety about this. My memory is not what it used to be, so that's one of the reasons I have notes. But my mother would embarrass me because, you know, children are embarrassed by their parents anyway. But mine would go into these Italian neighborhoods and look for the soft, and in the French market, and look for the softest tomatoes she could find. Ones that were not good for salad, they were only good for sauce, and she would start this fight. You're gonna throw them away. You can give me a better price. And then they would have this big, and I gotta tell you, Sicilians are as passionate as the Afro-Creole community. The level of their voices would raise and their hands would start flying, and there would be this whole big argument about 15 cents worth of tomatoes. And I would want to crawl under one of the shelves or something. And then they would start talking in Italian, and my mother would find the greatest joy to answer them in Italian in that argument. And she would I knew it was a setup. She would set them up, and it got to the point where, when we would walk in the grocery store, and the man behind the counter would go, "No!" And one day when he did that, she went on the shelf, she got a box of Argo starch, because we starched our clothes and put them on the line. She got a loaf of Italian bread and a tin of, what's the little fish? Sardines. And she put them on the counter, and she paid for them. No, not a word, not an argument, not a word. And on the way out, the man asked her in Italian, "Are you feeling well?" Because there was no fight. He thought she was sick. And so, but this is what community is about. You know each other, you know your habits, you know what to expect. And so she found that so funny, and I didn't understand Italian. When I got outside, I said, "What did he say?" She said, "He wanted to know if I was feeling okay." And so I always knew when we were going to have what we call red gravy. Now, I don't know the proper name. I don't know the name that's in cookbooks. But we called it red gravy because she would say, get somebody and go to Decatur Street and get the bread. Well, there was no question what the bread was because everybody else had French bread, but there was a certain bread that she wanted from the grocery on Decatur. And in the 900 block, there was Central and there was also Progresso.
Yeah.
There was two Italian groceries. And I gotta tell you, if you have never smelled an Italian grocery, you need to be reincarnated just to have that experience. The smell of hanging salami and cheese and tins of wonderful things from everywhere and more than 3 or 4 kinds of olive oil. But the smell alone made you hungry. And going in those grocery stores with my cousins, because if there's going to be a road trip, everybody has to go. I'm going to get the bread. That means Decatur Street was so dangerous at the time. Decatur Street was not somewhere that a little girl went alone. So you got an older cousin, male, to go with you. And of course, if there's a road trip, then everybody else follows along. And I remember as a small girl there would be Jack's cookies, broken pieces of Jack's cookies in these large cookies, and they would offer you a piece of cookie. Well, a broken piece of cookie. And most children were thrilled to get this, but I was born a foodie. And a cookie is not my ambition. Even as a child, I was never the little girl that was thrilled for a cookie. And so I remember that I had the groceries trained to offer me something else. From a small child with my mother, they'd say, they'd offer you the cookie, and there were 3 for penny candies. Sometimes they would offer you that, and all my cousins, everybody would take it. And I was like, no, I don't want to, no thank you. And then an odd child I was to grow up to be an odd adult. But they would, finally somebody said, what would you like? And I said, a piece of that cheese, please. I wanted a piece of that cheese, or a slice of mortadella, or something, or a piece of salami. And God, what I wouldn't do for a slice of pepper sausage. Remember the sausage with the black peppers in it? Yeah. What I wouldn't do for that. So you train people how to treat you, and so yes you do. Oh yes you do. So when I go inside, when I go in the grocery for 10 cents of salami and 10 cents of cheese, they would slice an extra one, cut a piece of butcher block paper, and give me a piece of salami over the counter. And of course that grew to the point where and I'm going to tell you about Italians, and I believe it like I'm standing here, or Sicilians, excuse me, or Gioni. I believe it from the bottom of my heart. If you leave Sicilians alone for 5 minutes, when you get back, they've either cooked something delicious or they've built something beautiful. The most beautiful, when I did cemetery tours, the most beautiful cemetery tomb in St. Louis, #1, is the Italian Society tomb. And so we lived in a relationship with them. And what did we give them? Because it's always a two-way street. What did they get from us? These disenfranchised people got acceptance from us. Because as an Afro-Creole, we don't care who you are. We want to see how you act. And so this disenfranchised community, as soon as they came in, long before I was born and long before my mother was born, they received acceptance. And the other thing, several things they got from us, but I can tell you what else. If you've never had Zupardo's fried chicken, I know they got that from us. The first time I tasted it, I knew. And one time I was saying, oh, y'all have to have, because you know me, I can't hold it. I was saying, oh, you gotta have a black woman in that kitchen. Not shy. Until they went and got one of the Zupardo boys out. And he told me he fried the chicken. And then he said, it was holiday time, have you tasted my oyster dressing? And I said, no, but it can't taste like mine. And he went in the kitchen and he got a little container and he put me some oyster dressing in it. So I know that it is Afro-Creoles or the Creole community that taught them how to cook the New Orleans Creole food, because it's no way that they licked that off the sidewalk. You had to be, my mama used to say, oh yeah, that's his child. She didn't lick that off the sidewalk. She was just like it. And I know they did not lick it off the sidewalk, that they had to be very close to us to know how to fry chicken, make oyster dressing, and these kinds of things. But it is food, and it is Catholicism, and it is superstition, and it is all these things that made our community so symbiotic, because we are, as Afro-Creoles, devoutly Catholic. And we have the love of family and the love of food, and so we lived very happily close together. We also have our superstitions, and Sicilians are not short of superstitions either. And so some we got from them, and some they got from us. And we didn't get this from them, never to spill olive oil. That's not us. They brought that with them. But not to drop the salt shaker, or not to sprinkle salt. Either we got it from them or they got it from us, because every time I drop salt in the kitchen, what's the rule? You gotta go get sugar and drop the sugar behind the salt before you clean it up. Because yes, I am still superstitious. The number 13 is lucky to them. The number 17 is not. Number 13 is lucky, but they will not allow 13 people at a dinner table. Sicilians don't want 13 people at a dinner table. Check my time. 34 hours. I gotta hurry up. I got so much to tell you. That's the problem, though. My students could tell you I can get started. I just can't stop. You know what happened to Jesus with them 13 people at the table, right? 12 apostles in him. You see what happened to him, huh? They will not allow 13 people at the table. And I'm gonna need, where's my Italians? I got it? Okay. My Sicilians. Look out for them. Malachi curse, the evil eye. What's it called? Maloki curse. Look out for the curse. And I worked with an Italian woman who used to tell me that. Watch out for her. She got the Maloki curse, right? So she was always paranoid of this one girl who was part black and part Native American. And this girl swore this girl knew voodoo. She said, every time I'm around her, I never make any money. This girl's got to put a curse on me. Black cats. They don't. Sicilians don't like black cats. Now here's one I don't know whether they got from us and we got from them. If you touch a black person's foot with a broom, get ready for the argument. Please get ready for the argument. Oh no, I'm gonna go to jail. Bring that argument. You gotta spit on the broom to keep them going. If you sweep the foot of a Sicilian, especially a young unmarried person, it is said that they'll never get married. They never get married if you sweep their foot. And the other thing is, they do not seat the unmarried at the end of the table. The unmarried has to be seated next to somebody. Because if you sit them at the end of the table, they'll never get married because you curse them, there's nobody next to them. And they will live their lives with nobody next to them. So for that reason, you never sit a single person at the end of the table. No matter how many times throughout my life I have been around Sicilians, I was fortunate enough for them to be complete. I don't know about everybody else, but with me, they find a place of comfort and complete honesty. It's something about me, it was something about my mother, and it has passed on to my son. The one thing I noticed in the grocery stores, I never saw women of childbearing ages. It was always men. It was men, and they all knew how to cut something. They all knew how to cut meat. They all knew how, they worked the, but there was this ever presence of an older mother figure, Italian woman sitting in the grocery. And the beads, the rosary, was always in their hands. The shawl was always around their shoulders. And if you think there's an app for everything, that old woman's got a saint for every situation. Now remember, I knew these people because I saw these people every day. We had relationships. How are you doing? You know, this kind of thing. You know, how's your mom and what's going on? How's this kind of thing? Oh, this is happening. Oh, baby, you gotta pray to St. Joseph if you're looking for a job. You gotta pray to St. Joseph the worker if you're looking for a job, right? Oh, I'm looking for a new apartment. Oh, you gotta pray to St. Joseph for an apartment. I want to move. Because she said, remember, he and Mary were looking for a place to live. He's gonna help you find an apartment, right? Oh, well, how's this one or that one? Well, they're not feeling good. Oh, you gotta pray to St. Jude. Do you know that in my research for my tour company, I found out that it was a Sicilian women that got St. Jude to be the international shrine of St. Jude because now there hasn't been a plague in I don't know how long, but it seems like it's embedded in the memory of Sicilians that there might or could be a plague. Do you know that I recently read that they went back to St. Jude for COVID? They started praying to St. Jude because he is a doctor for the COVID, because we were going through, COVID was a plague, wasn't it? Yeah. So they went back to praying to St. Jude. But it was the women who, when it was St. Anthony of Padua, St. Anthony of Padua, because one thing in our history I can tell you about Sicilians, they will take over a church. They will take over a church. That church, St. Guadalupe wasn't built for them. Guadalupe was built as a mortuary chapel, and then it became the Church of the Confederates, and then it became the Church of the Italians, and on the top of it there are pictures where it was named St. Anthony of Padua. And I'm talking to a friend of mine in Tremé one day, and you see, we were integrated by neighborhood, but it was government that segregated us. It is institutions that segregated us. Because this person is about 8 or 9 years older than me, and he told me, he said, well, you remember when the Italians took over St. Augustine? And I was going, I don't remember the Italian. He said, where did you go to church? I said, I was crowned, christened, and confirmed at St. Peter Claver. He said he remembers that the Italians had a large population in St. Augustine, and the archdiocese moved Afro-Creoles to Peter Claver. I don't remember that because I remember St. Augustine always being integrated. Or is my memory wrong? Or am I not old enough to remember that?
No, you're right.
It was always, right? Can I get some help here?
I lived there. I went to St. Augustine.
And it was always integrated, even back to the 1950s. And,
yes.
Okay, yeah, because
it was always integrated.
Yeah, but because I don't think we were all moved to I just happened to at that point live on St. Anne on the other side of Claiborne, That's why I ended up at St. Peter Claver. But I remember some of my cousins who always went to St. Augustine, right? So, but when it came to school and stuff like that, it was institutions that, because we didn't go to the same schools. The Progresso grocery store on Decatur Street was started by a man by the name of Giuseppe Udo. And Michael Udo, did anybody know Michael Udo? You knew Michael Udo? He was a chef. Michael Udo was a chef who happened to own a restaurant 2 blocks from where his great-great-great-grandfather started a grocery store. So it's not that. Michael Udo was one of the finest chefs I've ever worked with. So it's not like the Sicilian community is gone, because both Laura and I worked for Michael Udo. Let's talk about my first experience with a ripe fig. Yeah. So my mother did days work. She was a housekeeper. And she would walk me in the evening around the neighborhood. And I can promise you, if you starved in Tremé, you wanted to be hungry because everything grew in between the French Quarter. I can tell you where every fig tree was after this first encounter. Must have been about 4 or 5 years old. And there was a woman in Tremé, close to Esplanade on Galvez Street. And the house set back behind a fence. And my mother knew her, and she knew my mother. And one day she was gathering figs in her apron. And in those days, there were outside faucets where you washed clothes and you washed fruit, you washed things in an outside faucet. And she went and she washed the fig and she brought it to me, ripe fig. And I tasted for the first time in my life something that I have never forgotten. But it caused a problem as I grew older. I knew where every fig tree was, and I could tell you where the last one that I could get to in the French Quarter was on Dauphine between Saint Anne and Dumais. Behind a parking lot, there was a fence, and there was a fig tree there, and I used to drag a ladder to that fence and climb that fence. You remember where I'm talking about? To that fig tree. The rule is in the neighborhood, if it's over the fence, you can have it. But you cannot cross people's fence to get to their fruit. They didn't tell me I couldn't climb into that fruit. And so the neighbors had to, that misbelieves, you remember misbelieves, kumquats, the little ones, right. People's persimmons, all of this grew in Tremé and the French Quarter. There was always something growing. But people had to always talk to my mother to ask her, please ask Denise to stop going between the birds and Denise. I'm not getting any of the fruit. Okay? You know how they got me out of the fig tree? And I don't know if it's true, but I got one in my yard, but I'm still paranoid about this. You have to find what a person is afraid of. And I'm deathly afraid of snakes. And Miss Lena told my mother to tell me that there were snakes in that fig tree. And that was the only way people could stop me from climbing in their trees and not even taking the fruit on the other side, because I knew when I reached for it, a snake was going to bite me. So I stopped so other people had to get the fruit for me. I was standing, I must have been about 9 or 10, and I was older than that. I was about 12 or 13. And in our neighborhood, you know, we live close to Canal Street, right? Walking distance. And my dream was to marry a Sicilian boy by the name of Lightfinger Louis. That was Lightfinger Louis was always running from the police. Not the regular police, the police in the stores on Canal Street. You know, they had these undercover shoplifting people in Canal Street. And Lightfinger Louis was always running from them. Lightfinger Louis always had pretty clothes in the bag, all kind of stuff. And growing up in the French Quarter at Tremé, I thought I was going to marry Lightfinger Louis. He was so good looking. Well, you know, that wasn't going to happen. My family was not having that. But one day I'm in the grocery store. Lightfinger Louis runs in the grocery store, runs in the back of the store with a bag, runs out of the grocery store and runs down the street. Next thing you know, here comes this man in a suit. In the middle of summertime, he's got on a suit. And he comes in the store and he asks the man behind the counter, "Did you see Louis?" And the man said, "Louis? There's nobody in this grocery store but us." And him thinking I'm the weakest link, not knowing I'm in love with Louis, looks at me and he says, "Didn't Louis come through the grocery store?" "Well, honey, a building don't have to fall on me." I said, "Sir, it's just us here. I'm in the grocery store." "No, nobody's in here." And so the next day, Louis tried to give my mother something for me, something hot as a firecracker, and my mother would not take it. She said, "We are not starting this foolishness. No. You can't take anything from him. If he offers you something, say no." And so growing up in the neighborhood, you learn the vibration of the neighborhood. If everybody in the neighborhood says no, you say no too. And so, did you all know that Sicilians and Creoles not only ran the grocery store scene, but they ran the bar scene also? Grocery stores were sometimes attached to bars. Right. And children could go in there and get a quart beer, which was 16 cents a quart when I went and got it for my family, and go back across the street. They would give you the beer, give you the change, walk you across the street. One of the most celebrated bars in the city, in Tremé, was in the 900 block of St. Claude. That's where it started. And that bar started before I was born. It started as a grocery store. And Michael Tessitore and his family had a grocery store, 942 St. Claude. That turned into the Caledonia. That bar turned into the Caledonia. One of the most celebrated bars in anybody doing their PhD on Tremé is got to come across that information. Now, when they decided to put the interstate on Claiborne Avenue, two things decimated Tremé. One was the interstate on Claiborne Avenue. I don't know whether we were not paying attention, and I was a young girl at the time, or that we just didn't have the political power to stop it. Because I do remember Claiborne Avenue having Afro-Creole businesses all up and down Claiborne Avenue, get to Orleans or Basin Street, make that turn. make that turn, there were Afro-Creole and Sicilian businesses on both sides, right? And the Avenue Oaks. And it looked like they pulled up those trees overnight, because I remember waking up and everybody in the neighborhood in shock because those trees were up. And this is what I remember: bird nests. Those trees had bird nests. And not only were the trees up, but the bird nests and the baby birds and everything. With my sensitive self, you know, I almost needed a psychiatrist after that. Seeing baby birds pulled up out the nests. We lost Afro-Creole businesses, we lost Sicilian businesses, we lost restaurants, and everybody in that community had a picture from Smith's Photography, where you sat and everybody wanted to have their picture there. We lost the community, and it killed the businesses. The second thing we lost, the second time the community was devastated, when Armstrong Park was put there. There were people and businesses that lived, and a school, a McDonald's, what was it, 42? A McDonald's school in that neighborhood when they built Armstrong Park, with the promise, and it's always this promise, that it would be time.
It's like 5 minutes.
I got 5 minutes. Economically good for the community. So far, none of those things have been. There's talk now to take down the interstate. I don't know how they're going to do it. Where's all the traffic going to go? Thank you, my darling. Thank you, honey. Just a few more things, and I'll be done and open for questions. We need to talk about St. Joseph Altars. St. Joseph Altars, when I was a small girl, happened inside of people's houses. They happened inside of people's houses. And I could always make extra money doing St. Joseph because my mother worked for Sicilians. And when the same time for St. Joseph Altars, she would have to work late because everybody baked, everybody cooked. This was a community project. And I remember and I'm always looking for a hustle. I could make extra money. You know what my job was to cut the tops off of artichokes, slam them on the counter, because they would slam them on the counter to open them wide enough to be stuffed. Put them on a tray, and because most of these Sicilian women were older, they sat down and cooked. It was healthy people that stood on their feet, that put cookies in the oven and did these things. So then and they did them by the hundreds. And I would bring the tray, put them on a little table for her, and she would have a bowl full of Italian breadcrumb and cheese and fresh parsley, and she would stuff them and stuff them and stuff them. And then I had to cut finely sliced pieces of lemon, put on top, and then drizzle with olive oil. And then they would sit and steep in just the biggest pots they could find. This is when you brought out your big pots. And steep, right? And then pick them up and with my hands. Pick them up and pick them up with my hands. Well, I must have been trained, because then I went to work in restaurants and kitchens, and nothing could hurt me. St. Joseph Day belonged to the Sicilians, but St. Joseph Night belonged to Afro-Creoles. You see this intersectionality between these two. Remember, we're in the middle of Lent, and nobody's more Catholic than Afro-Creoles and Sicilians. We're Catholic to the bone. And so there's a respite in the middle of Lent with St. Joseph. It was a party. You came out in your Mardi Gras Indian costume. We could go out in the evening. Laura's research is showing that everybody came out. And so in the middle of Lenten season, when we had to do the rosary, how many of y'all had to do the rosary at 6 o'clock every evening? Yeah, we did the rosary in my house 6 o'clock every evening. That we could have some kind of party. That did not mean you could eat meat though. You notice there is no meat on St. Joseph altars. But Lenten season, in spite of its limitations, was always my favorite food time. Lenten season has good food in it. You know what I'm saying? Think about it. Lenten season has delicious food in it. You have all this fish and all this seafood and crab cakes and stewed turtle. Now, I don't know how the Catholic Church came up with the thing that the turtle is not meat, but I want to thank God for it because I love stewed turtle and potato salad. And when seafood was scarce, the Sicilians taught us how to make pasta and gravy and what's those little hairy fish in the and I still love it today. Italian sauce.
Yes.
With my amen corner right there. Italian sauce, the spaghetti, right? Lay the anchovies on top, yeah? And please do not serve a Sicilian spaghetti without a big spoon for them to twirl it. Twirl it like that. You don't know what you're doing if you serve spaghetti without a tablespoon. Because every Sicilian I know would use that tablespoon to twirl it, right? So the food was excellent around Lenten season, and like I told you, I'm a foodie. And so I am grateful. Make sure I covered everything. I am grateful. Oh, yeah, some things I didn't tell. I am grateful for growing up in a society. I mean, you know, God in His infinite wisdom, put two passionate groups of people together when He put Creoles and Sicilians together. I want to say couple more things. Then we can talk about, you can ask me questions if you like. But we influence each other in many ways. I'd like to call names. In my Afro-Creole community, the way you honor people, if you call their name, they never die. I get full. Give me a minute. Typical Afro-Creole, I get emotional easily. I worked for a man by the name of Charles Napoli. I was the first woman of any color in the restaurant on Decatur Street, 1011 Decatur Street. It's called Savisa's. No? They didn't hire women. Initially, it was owned by a gay doctor, and the staff was gay, everybody was gay, it was this. Charles Napoli bought that restaurant, and I went in there, and I wanted a job. I wanted to work there. It was beautiful, it was just where I wanted to be. I needed to be there. And somebody told me, there are no women. They don't hire women in that restaurant. Yeah, they do. Me. Charles Napoli hired me, and at the time, I was helping to raise a grandchild. I have never in my life met an employer with such class. He was kind, and he was generous, and he was fair, and he and I had a relationship that everybody else on the staff wanted to cut my throat and throw me in the alley because I had got my way, right? Got the days I wanted to. And I'd walk in the door and I'd say, all right, I'm taking all shifts. My granddaughter needs a flute. And I remember this. She's joined the band, she needs a flute. And later on that night, when he wanted to tell me a secret, because we had our secrets, he would call me like this with the one finger. And I'd go stand next to him and lean down, and he would slip money into my hand. He said, look, you ain't gotta work like that. Here's $300, that should buy the flute. This kind of kindness, right? This kind of kindness. Some people that you work for, you'll do anything for. You meet people where they just know how to ask you. And he knew how to ask me to do things for him. And so it's one of the few jobs that I could say I did walk away wanting to burn the place down. Because I'm not a good employee, okay? I'm not the best of you. You say one wrong thing and I'm holding it against you the rest of my life, right? But this is, also there was a man who owned the Faulkner bookstore by the name of Mr. DeSalvo, Joe DeSalvo, right? My son, who works in the French Quarter for the last 25 years. I won't say where, he's very private. Mr. Joe DeSalvo owned a bookstore, and my son loved to read, and he would go in there and read. Now, I didn't know my son knew Mr. Joe DeSalvo. One day, after Mr. DeSalvo died, we were talking about people we know in the French Quarter. He said, Mom, I knew him. He said he would give me books when I went in to the bookstore. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, one day he saw me, he said, I haven't seen you. My son said, oh, I went back to school. And Mr. DeSalvo was thrilled to hear it. He said, Ma, he kept telling me, don't quit, don't give up, no matter how hard it gets, don't give up. And so the next time my son saw Mr. DeSalvo, he said, oh, I haven't seen you. My son said, oh, I graduated. And he said, this man, Mama, was as happy as anybody that I know. If Mr. DeSalvo knew how hard it was to get my son back to college, he would have never had to buy, never had to cook another meal. I'd have been bringing meals to the Pirates Alley every day until, I'm telling you. So those two people I would like to honor that have made such a difference in our lives, because whenever anybody encourages your children or do anything for you for your children, they deserve all the respect that you could give them. I hope you enjoyed my talk tonight. But I'm not on my own light bill, so I don't know how long this can last. Yes?
So I'm 100% Irish and was raised Southern Baptist, so this has been a great history.
Wait, say it again?
I said I'm 100% Irish and was raised Southern Baptist, so this has been a great history.
How did that happen? Not here, not here. Let me tell you, Mr. Joe, who had the grocery on St. Anne and Prairie, his wife, Miss Leslie, was an Irish, a redhead Irish woman, and things were fine till she got mad. And when she got mad, you heard it up and down the neighborhood. She stayed mad longer than anybody I know. Are you living in New Orleans now?
Yes, I have been for about 5 years now.
How you love it?
I've been coming since I was 20. So.
Yeah, this is what happens in New Orleans. You visit here. You keep visiting here, right? And sooner or later, you're going to end up with an apartment here. You see all that tape, I'm visiting, and, oh yeah, that's nice. How many times you been in New Orleans? 5. I said, look, call me when you're looking for an apartment. I'll help you. I'll look around for you. Because let me tell you, what you're doing is slowly bringing yourself home. Does it feel like home? Yeah. And let me tell you about New Orleans, baby, if you haven't noticed. This is the most dysfunctional. It is not easy to live here. There are better qualities of life, other places, but you won't be happy. You will not be happy with them people that come home from work, don't speak to their neighbors, and go inside and close the damn door. What is that about? Who are you? Could be a serial killer next to you. You're supposed to know your neighbors.
But my question.
Okay. I digress.
So can you tell me, as a child, your feeling, how you felt early Mardi Gras morning, Mardi Gras day, the tradition for you early Mardi Gras?
Oh, we've been getting ready for that. What are you talking about? We're getting ready for that for weeks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, months, weeks. You had to have the costume, and you had to, and you knew where you were going because you went the same places every day. And yeah. This was, honey. I am 69 years old. I had a baby doll suit on Mardi Gras Day. Okay. This is, and every year, you know what I say? Oh, I'm not doing with that again. I'm not doing that again. I can't do that again. Let me tell you what happens to you and the culture. If you get involved in the culture of this city, it is seductive.
Oh, yes.
It is addictive. It is, let me tell you, I don't care how bad my budget is. Somebody call me and say, you want to go out for dinner? Oh, girl, yeah, let's go. Now, I know I ain't got no money to go to dinner. Ooh, I'm going. Oh, you want to do this? I'm going. Okay? Right? She had me in the notarial archives the other day, and if you love history, oh, baby, honey, let me tell you, one thing our founding father, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Thank God the French got here first. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The Spanish were better administrators. But that reason that you took that fourth glass of wine was the French. You understand? Oh, girl, have another glass of wine. You might die tomorrow. What you doing? Right? And you could very well die tomorrow in our history, because yellow fever could have took you out in 5 days. Have that other glass of wine. It's called for. And the other thing about us sitting down, having a cup, just sitting, having a cup of coffee. It's called, in French, it's called forniente, right? Where's my French teachers? It's called forniente. Sit. Have a cup of coffee, talk to your friends. You understand? Find a way to slow down. I threw the TV out my house. I put the 55-inch TV out my house. You're not going to have me trapped watching that foolishness. I had to get rid of that thing. That thing was stealing my life, right? I called my other granddaughter. I said, you want a 55-inch TV? How you feel, Granny? You all right? Is something hurting you? No, come get that thing out my house. I can't get nothing done, and they ain't got nothing on it, and it depresses me when I turn it on in the morning. If you love history, we are the best documentarians. This culture, we document everything. Huh?
And we're going to go out to dinner next week.
Oh, girl. Let me tell you, my business manager called me. I need to close out some stuff. Let me get some work done. I'm going to give you my card. Anytime your business manager calls you and say, the people going to put you to jail if you don't close out these. I got things to close out. I got business to do. Yes.
Miss Denise, I have to tell you what.
Don't miss me. You know me.
This is how my daddy woke us up on Mardi Gras morning. If you kids don't get up and put your costumes on, we're going to miss the Indians.
Ah! And that was at 5 o'clock in the morning. Why does we have to leave so early? Oh, wait, but listen, Mardi Gras is now organized. I remember when you had to look for the Zulus.
Oh, yes.
You didn't know where they were going. No, there was no routes. There was nothing. You had to find the Indians. You had to find the Zulus. You had a very good idea where spelling balls were, but you spent the day, half the day, looking for people.
Earlier, before we started, my DDAs heard you say a distinction between uptown and downtown Indians.
Talk about that. All right, so, wasn't a trap. I'm not afraid. let me tell you the difference between uptown and downtown Indians. I don't know if it's this way now, but historically, three-dimensional suits started downtown, unless you can prove it. These three-dimensional suits started by Tootie, Montana, these kind of suits. Uptown Indians, a lot of times you gotta read the suit. If you read the suit's gonna tell you. Uptown Indians did Plains Indians, Indians on horses, these kinds of things. Okay, now let me tell you where they got that from, where these designs started from. Remember, not all these people are artists, but what they had was coloring books. A lot of these designs that you see in the early suits came from scenes out of coloring books. That's why you see Plains Indians with arrows and stuff. We don't have no representation of that in our culture, right? But that's where they got their inspiration from these coloring books. Then you had to find an artist to draw it for you. Then you could work the thing. Now, downtown Indians. Look for historical symbolism. Marie Laveau on the patch. This kind of stuff, right? Because our culture is so distinct down here. I'm gonna talk to you, I promise you. And the other thing is, Fayaya started down here. See, remember, we had always in the Afro-Creole community, we had a sense of responsibility to the Black movement, right? A lot of like Duck, like Big Duck was those people that rode the Freedom Riders, right? Freedom Riders. So we have a large percentage of people that was downtown that fought in the civil rights movement. So we go back to this Africa with these full mask, Fayaya, all of that stuff started downtown. What's your question? That's the difference.
We had a discussion about Native Americans and if any, thought was given, but any discussion was had with Native Americans about the masking Indians appropriating their culture.
Well, I got you. Don't worry. I'm gonna work with you, baby. I got you. Let me tell you something. I'm a tour guide. I own a tour company. If I tell you, if this question came, I wish I had $1 every time this question came out recently. Mardi Gras Indians have been in contact with Louisiana Indian tribes from around the country. You have to remember, we had one of the largest maroon communities right here off the Shepmenture Highway around Lake Bourne and all these. Native Americans took us in when we ran away from slavery, made us members of their tribe, taught us how to live and eat and survive in that swamp. Never will you see, not lately, not since, a Mardi Gras Indian suit that looks nothing like a Native American suit. They don't look alike. The other thing is, this is to honor those people who gave us away when there was no way. And here's the other thing you need to know. And here's my genealogist right here. A lot of times, and this young man's been researching since he's 9 or 10 years old. I remember when I first met him. And let me tell you, I'm not too old to take a correction, okay? I don't have an ego anymore. Okay? I just want to work through to live as long as I can live with good people around me and love and good food and stuff like that. So my ego is gone. When black people tell you, I got Indian in my blood, could very well be. They could very well be because of this relationship with them. In the Creole community, when we describe each other, right? Oh, you know so-and-so, you know Pierre, you got that Indian color to him, that Indian red, brownish like that, that Indian Creole. Don't we have we got a category called, you look like them Indian Creoles. We got a description for every color of your skin. Oh, you know it, right? And one of the descriptions is, you look like them Indian Creoles. So, no, this is not appropriation. Let me tell you what appropriation is. Let me put a sorry on and a dot in my forehead. That's appropriation. That is appropriation, but something this is a culture, intertwined, interlaced, inside of each other. This was not a colony that could have survived culturally separated. We survived by being culturally intertwined with the people that were here and the people that could come here. In the beginning, the Native Americans laughed at those Europeans because nobody lived on this land. This was a place that they came to have the festival. And there was also a language. Since all these different tribes spoke a different language, when they came here, they developed a language called Mobilian that they spoke just to do rituals and festivals and stuff like that. We survived. This culture is what it is. You are here if you came here. You came here not for one thing. You came for the combination, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, and somebody can stab you, for the gumbo of this culture, for the jambalaya of this culture, for the intermixing of this culture. This is why you bought a house here. This is why you found your way here. And it is why we stay here. We don't stay here because things are perfect. Right now, I almost had a meltdown by the street. The streets are so broken up right now, I almost had, I don't want to drive. Oh my God. So this is everything you see that has been here. It's not about appropriation. When I make asabuco, am I appropriating that Sicilian culture? No. I am not. And I'm going to tell you one more thing, and then we got to go, y'all. This is not my light bill. Let me tell you one more thing. So one day, I cook Italian because my mother cooks Italian. And I asked this Italian lady, I said, but my sauce don't taste like yours. There's something y'all not telling me. There's something missing. I said, no matter what I do, my sauce does not come out that way, and I've tried everything. That's what she told me. She said, did you saute the pig foot with the seasoning? I said, what? She said, did you saute a pig foot with the seasoning? I said, I have been trying to get away from a pig foot since I was a small girl. I want to thank y'all for your time. Thank you.
Let's continue that. Denise Augustine, everyone. A couple of housekeeping things before we let you go. Thank you everyone for coming to our events, just like this one. Our next lecture actually features, just can't talk today. Features Diane Honore. She will be talking about the Black Storyville Babydolls. You can actually see her suit right back there. It is the red one, right in front of that portrait. And speaking of suits, Angel, go ahead and raise your hand for us.
Oh.
Angel is the one who constructed the two suits to the left there.
Wonderful.
So please. She knew I would do this to her, so. Feel free to stick around and ask her questions about it, ask about her, the reason why she portrayed the things she did on her suit. One of her suit, most recently actually, speaking of history, incorporates 3 different portraits, one of which is Angela Davis and one of which is Nefertiti. So please talk to her about that. Later this month, we do have a wine tasting on March 23rd. You can sign up for that just as you signed up for this lecture through Eventbrite, through our Facebook page. And we have our next concert, which is in Bloom with Bon Bon Vivant, which many of you are familiar with. And that will be out in the courtyard in early April, which should be magnificent. And very much lastly, I would be a very poor house manager and programs person if I did not mention these things. This is a membership card. If you like to stay up to date and you like to support programming just like this one, we survive off of memberships. We are a nonprofit museum. We do not make a ton of money, honestly. And so these really help us continue programming just like this one. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Denise, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.